Well, I have a confession to make. Yes, I have a confession to make to all of my beloved listeners and subscribers of this channel. And this is my confession. Here we go. I just sat down for the first time and saw Wendi Adelson's interrogation from beginning to the end. At least what I saw. It was a 4-hour, 36-minute interrogation of Wendi Adelson. And boy, was that interesting. And I know that I should have seen it before, I should have seen it during the trial, but I still also actually actively represent clients. I'm still trying to balance everything and still be able to bring you all of this trial analysis. So please forgive me, but some very interesting things that I thought and observed, and one really, which I thought was just a bombshell, which I couldn't believe it. I was blown off my chair watching something about the interrogation, which I don't know if anybody else brought this up. So if anybody else did this bring up any other channels, please let me know in the comments. But I thought that it was fascinating. And it goes like this. Who do you think, if I would ask anybody, anyone who's been following this trial, who did Wendi want to take the fall for Dan Markel's murder? Who was it? I think anyone who has been watching the trial would say it was Jeffrey Lacasse. She wanted Jeffrey Lacasse to take that fall. He was supposed to be the fall guy. Why? Well, as we heard from Jeffrey Lacasse, right? They were in this big fight a few weeks before the murder. They were in this big fight. He accused her of cheating, and something that you learned from this interrogation, at least this was the story according to Wendi, which did not seem to come out so clearly on Jeffrey's direct or cross-examination during his testimony. It didn't really come out exactly, specifically what the dispute was about. But what came out during the interrogation was that apparently there was this other man who Wendi was dating initially. So initially, before there's any serious relationship, Wendi was dating a person by the name of Daniel Sack, and as well as Jeffrey Lacasse. She was dating both of them, and I guess it was very much more casual at the time, and she was kind of just feeling out the water, see, who would be, maybe it was just more casual, more friendly, and see maybe someone is cut out to be her real boyfriend or, whatever. So that was going on. And what happened was, and this is according to what I learned from the interrogation, is that Daniel Smock was actually leaving. He was going to become a professor in Massachusetts. And Jeffrey Lacasse was sticking around. So she realized, well, if she doesn't want to have a long-distance relationship, then Jeffrey Lacasse has to be the guy that she's going to get more serious with. Now, something to think about is, did she really prefer Daniel Smack? Was it, maybe Smock. I'm sorry, Daniel Sack. Daniel Sack. So did she really prefer Daniel Sack, and just he was leaving town, so she was kind of felt like she was stuck with Jeffrey, or not as excited? Was she really more into Daniel? I'm not 100% sure. It's possible. And maybe Jeffrey kind of felt this the entire time. Maybe he kind of felt that, that he was just kind of the option that she was kind of stuck with. I don't know. But that's just, that's just some speculation. But it's something that, I don't know, I was trying to get a little bit of a feeling that maybe she really preferred Daniel. Anyway, so she was first casually involved with Daniel and with Jeffrey, and then she got more serious with Jeffrey. And a few months later, Jeffrey accused her of cheating with Daniel. And that's how she says the story. It wasn't that she was on some sort of dating app like OkCupid, which came out during the testimony, but it was actually, the issue was Daniel Sack. And and the way that Wendi says the story is that Jeffrey saw some of her text messages, some of her phone calls, and I'm assuming that some of those text messages did not sound like, hey, hope you're doing well in Massachusetts, let me know how your classes are. Seems like they were a little more exciting than that. And perhaps that's what he confronted her with. And that's when they got into this big fight. And you'll remember that they got into this big fight literally like a week or two before the murder, and Jeffrey thought that at that point the relationship was going to be over. Yet, they traveled together from Tallahassee down back to South Florida, that long, long trip they did together. And he said that it was so uncomfortable in the car because they just went through this whole big fight. But she really wanted him together to go together with her down to South Florida. And then she said she needed a little bit of a break from him. She wanted to organize her thoughts and think about the relationship. And I believe that according to his testimony, she was still kind of dragging him along. And specifically, when it came to that day, that she was very interested in where he was going to be Friday. Are you going to be in town in Tallahassee Friday? When? Because he was supposed to leave. Remember, he was supposed to leave. So she was very interested. Why are you going to be in town? Are you not going to be in town? And then he said, yeah, I'm going to still be in town Friday. And then on a whim, he left Thursday night, which ended up saving him because that was his alibi. Then he ended up leaving Thursday night, and he had a receipt to some hotel. Okay, then he was cleared, right? So, when you're hearing this story from casual observers like ourselves, you're saying, oh, okay, so it's very obvious that she wanted Jeffrey to be the fall man. She wanted Jeffrey to be the jealous new boyfriend, and he's just so upset by the way that Dan is treating her and so much stress that he's causing her, and he's the one that's going to be the saving grace here and come and murder Dan, right? So that's what the picture that I got, at least from watching this trial. But what's interesting is that if I would ask you, if this was Wendy's plan always was that she's going to keep Jeffrey close to her until the murder, and then he'll be able to be the fall guy, right? If that was the plan, so then let me ask you a question. What number suspect do you think she would suggest to the investigator that it was Jeffrey? What number do you think she would do? So maybe she may, if she was a smart, you would say, well, she's not going to mention it first, right? That would look too obvious. So maybe she may mention 1 or 2, maybe even 3 before. And then when she brings up Jeffrey, she'll be very casual about, oh yeah, maybe it was Jeffrey. I had this boyfriend. You know, he would always get so upset that I was upset and I was going through so much stress from my divorce from Dan, and therefore he wanted to be the saving. Yeah, it's possible. You know, you kind of just throw it out there and, you know, just let the police do their work, right? That's kind of what you would do. So, would it surprise you? Let me just ask the question, okay? What number suspect do you think Wendy, during her interrogation, what number suspect do you think she suggested with Jeffrey Lacasse? 1, let's say she suggested 10. Was it closer to 1, closer to 5, or closer to 10? And the answer is, this might surprise you, the answer is never. She never suggested that it was Jeffrey Lacasse. Isn't that mind-blowing? I mean, when I was watching this, I was waiting with bated breath. When is she going to say that maybe it was Jeffrey? And she never did it. You know who brought up the idea that maybe it was Jeffrey Lacasse? Was Wendy's friend, Jane McPherson, I believe her name was. And the way that came about is because the victim advocate came in and was talking to Wendy and said, oh, who can we have here with you to help support you through this very challenging time? And she gave her a list of people, and they eventually were able to get a hold of Jane, and Jane came, and then Jane was the one who was talking to Wendy, and Jane told Wendy and the victim advocate who was there, oh, maybe it was Jeffrey Lacasse. You didn't think about Jeffrey Lacasse? And then Wendy's like, oh, I never thought about that. And then they called the investigator back in, and then the investigator started asking Wendy about all these questions about Jeffrey Lacasse. And throughout the entire time, Wendy was very clear that she didn't believe that Jeffrey was jealous of Dan Markel. Rather, he was jealous of Daniel Sack. So if you watch this interrogation, it was just surprising. I couldn't believe it. Because I also, when I was watching this, I understood that Jeffrey was supposed to be the fall guy. But let me tell you something. From this interrogation, I don't know if Wendy thought that far ahead. I really don't. I'm really questioning that. And it's possible that she knew about the whole plan. It's possible that she was in on it. It's possible she's not in it. Okay, whatever. We can debate that. But it's possible that she was in on the plan, but she never even thought about maybe Jeffrey being the fall guy. And certainly from watching this interrogation, you would not automatically believe that. In fact, you would think, like I did, like, whoa, holy moly, how could she not even bring up the idea of Jeffrey Lacasse? How can she think that, oh, my friend's going to come and mention Jeffrey, and then I'll just, haphazardly tell, oh yeah, maybe it was Jeffrey, and then the police will figure this all out for themselves. I mean, that's just too wild. It's too wild to imagine. So let me tell you, after watching this interrogation, I have some real second thoughts about whether Jeffrey should really be, the whole plan was for him to be the fall guy. Now, just something else that I just was weighing on me a little bit as I was thinking about this whole situation with Jeffrey Lacasse again. And, the question that was asked of Jeffrey, why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you, after officially, remember Jeffrey Lacasse said that they had this very serious conversation, Jeffrey and Wendi, and Wendi said, I need to talk to you in confidence. This is allegedly right before they're about to break up, which again, leaves some questions about whether this conversation actually happened. And again, I'm not taking sides, but if they're about to break up, why would Wendi confide in Jeffrey? I think that's a valid question to be asked. And then when she does, in confidence, tell Jeffrey that Charlie looked into all possibilities, including hiring a hitman, why would he not go to the police? So what was his answer? His answer was, oh, well, I thought that was in the past. That was in the past that he looked into hiring a hitman, but I didn't think that it was a present threat. Now, how did that sit with you? Let me just ask you, how did that sit with you? Because it didn't sit well with me. It didn't. You know why? Because her husband is still her ex is very much alive, and he's very much, it still has a very contentious divorce, and they're filing all these bitter, nasty motions. You've testified yourself about how all of your conversations with Wendi, this is Jeffrey, you've testified yourself about all your conversations with Wendi have been surrounding this divorce and how much stress it's causing her. And you think, oh, that was just a year ago that Charlie looked into hiring a hitman. But it's not realistic now that they're going through this tremendously contentious divorce where he's filing motions that the grandparents should not have visitation rights without supervision. That is a valid, I think, strong question on Jeffrey Lacasse. What is going on there, really? So I don't know. There's some questions here, but I think what was fascinating from this interrogation is that she wasn't even the one to bring up the suggestion at all that Jeffrey Lacasse should be a suspect. So that was number one. Now I've got some other observations that I made, and I need some of your help here, some of my viewers, to help me out figure some of this stuff out. Okay, so here's number one. Remember the Best Buy TV? Everybody remembers the TV, right? The TV was broken. Was it her kids? Was it her intentionally? I don't know, right? That was the question, right? Who actually broke this television? Jeffrey Lacasse said that it was very clear that it was not one of the kids who broke it, and she was saying that it was one of the kids who broke it. Well, let's just think about it, right? She said in the interrogation, which is something, this is already bothering me while I was watching the trial, and maybe some of you have more experience with the Geek Squad. I don't personally. I don't buy many things from Best Buy, and I don't buy the Geek Squad warranty, so I'm not 100% sure myself, and this would be something worthwhile looking into, I think. But she says, and this is what she said in the interrogation, that this TV was under warranty, right? It was under warranty, which to me sounds like it's going to be covered one way or the other. You're not going to have to pay anything for this, right? That's what a warranty is, right? You're paying extra in the beginning so that if anything happens, then the TV will be covered. Either they're going to repair it or they're going to get you a new one. So what happens? The Geek Squad comes out to her house and they're deciding whether they're going to repair it or replace it, right? So in the interrogation, I don't think she said anything. Again, it was a 4-hour and 36-minute interrogation, so I don't remember 100%. But I don't think she said anything about having to call Charlie at that time. But during her testimony, she did say that she called Charlie. And what was her question to Charlie at the time? Her question was, does it make more sense to repair it or buy a new one? Now, hold on a minute. If this is under warranty, you don't have to pay anything, right? I mean, isn't that the way it works? All of my fellow viewerships, all of the people that are watching are subscribers. What's going on here? When you get a Geek Squad warranty, do you have to pay anything out of pocket? So if you do, then the question, I guess, makes sense. But if a warranty is what I would imagine a warranty is, that you don't have to pay anything, and the question is whether Best Buy is going to waste the time and energy and resources on fixing the television or just giving you a replacement one, what do you have to call Charlie for? What's the question exactly? Should I let Best Buy repair it, or should I let Best Buy, you care about what Best Buy is going to have to pay? So I'm just not sure. Maybe you can help me out with how Geek Squad warranties work. But that was just something that I was wondering about. Now, also, some people brought up the idea, the idea that this was not a shortcut, that she went to Trescott right the next day. or that day of the murder, she tried to go through Truscott, and she says that it was a shortcut, and really it was not a shortcut. So it was anything but a shortcut. So obviously she was going to check out the murder. Now I just want to talk about what the concept of calling something a shortcut that's not. And I know people, okay, very well, where they take funny routes to certain places. We're going to a certain place, we're leaving from the same location, we're going to the same location, and I think that there's a very, very direct route, and they believe that a different route is a better route to take, and they like taking that other route. And they may even in their mind think that it's a shortcut. And they may call it a shortcut. Now, it's possible, I'm just saying it's possible that people may call something a shortcut, and really that's not what they mean. What they mean is that they prefer to take that route for whatever reason. And she said that one of the reasons that she likes to take that route is because she likes to pass by the house, and then gives her some sense of closure about the divorce. Okay, so the fact that she calls it a shortcut, it's not weighing on me so much. It's not like the slam dunk, of the case. I don't think it's not like the checkmate in my mind. It's a question, sure. It's not a shortcut. You can make it look foolish, but I know people, and maybe some of you also, that they take funny routes for whatever reason, and they may refer to it as a shortcut, and really it's not. So it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, certainly it's a question about why is she going there, like so coincidentally at that time. And here's another thing, right? Which I didn't hear anybody else speak about, maybe somebody did, but here's another thing that she says in her interrogation. The day before the murder, the alarm to that house, Dan Markel's house on Truscott, tripped. And she got a phone call, right? She was one of the emergency contacts from that alarm company to contact in case the alarm trips in that house. And she got a call the day before, right? Okay, so, alarms trip sometimes, right? And I know I am the contact on my parents' alarm system, and I get phone calls all the time. I get phone calls almost every other day about the alarm tripping. I call my parents, yeah, everything's fine, okay, good. So it's okay. It's I guess could be common for people's alarms to trip and that certain emergency contacts get called. But here's the thing: the next day, when you're driving down Truscott and you see tape that's blocked off, you see crime tape. Maybe you didn't notice it was crime tape. Maybe you thought it was tree fell. Hold on a minute. Just yesterday, you got a phone call from the alarm company saying that house where your kids stay, that alarm tripped. Now, the next day you're driving down and you see that area is blocked off. You're not even going to think for a second. You're not going to think for a second and connect it to, well, hold on a second. Was somebody trying to get in yesterday? Was someone trying to break in yesterday and not today they were successful? It just makes the question stronger. I know a lot of people have the question that what's she doing in that area? Why is she driving by that? Obviously, it's consciousness of guilt, which is a good point. But I think this just makes it stronger. Yesterday, the alarm tripped, and now you're going down there again. You see it's blocked off. You're not going to think? You're going to think it's a tree? Come on. So I think that also just makes that a lot stronger. Now, when they were going through, when the investigator was going through possible suspects, right? So she said a few different things, which I thought were very interesting. She said, well, a lot of people don't love him. He's very argumentative, but no one would do anything like this. Okay, that's a fair comment. Some people can be argumentative and still, you're not going to murder the person because they're just argumentative. And he kept saying again, he wouldn't do this to himself. She kept saying it again. He wouldn't do this himself. He's not suicidal. He had plans. He had a girlfriend. He had a new girlfriend. He would never do this to himself. Now, if you watch that interrogation, every time she says that, you want to what are you doing? No one has ever suggested. If you watch that interrogation, it was very clear that they thought that somebody shot him. Somebody did this to him. This wasn't a suicide. It wasn't even a passing thought through this investigator's head. And she keeps mentioning it. Oh, he wouldn't do this himself. He wouldn't do this himself. Why? Why does she keep mentioning that? It's one thing to say it once or twice. She kept mentioning it. So why? So it's possible. I want to give you an idea of mine. It's possible that if she was in on this murder the entire time, she was in on, let's assume that she was in on the plot, right? If she was in on the plot, it's possible that when they were sitting down at the drawing table, they said, look, every single death, there has to be either a murder or a suicide, right? And one of the things a medical examiner has to rule out is this a suicide or is this a murder? So maybe she was getting herself ready for that question. Well, maybe this is a suicide. And maybe she felt that it would look better if she would say, no, this can't be a suicide. And maybe that it will make her look like she's actually trying to help them. So maybe this is actually, maybe, in preparation for what was going on. And then she was just saying, she was so revved up to say that this wasn't a suicide that she kept saying it even though no one even thought it was a suicide. So that's just a thought, an idea. You can let me know in the comments what you feel about that, but that was just an idea that I had. Okay, now she's going down the list of different suspects, and she says the following. This is what got me interested. This got me questioning. She says, I have a lot of friends, and they know that he didn't treat me well. I have a lot of friends, and they know that Dan didn't treat me well, right? And maybe someone did this to help. That was one of her suggestions to the investigator. Now, later on in the same interrogation, later on, she says the following. When the investigator asks her, did he ever abuse you during the marriage? She says he never physically abused me, but he did emotionally abuse me. But this is what she said. This is what she says. He emotionally abused me, but I never told anyone. I never told anyone about it. So people just thought it just didn't work out. That's what she said. Doesn't that directly contradict what she said, that her friend, she has lots of friends and they all know that he didn't treat me well? How do they know that he didn't treat you well? You just told me, you just said he wasn't physically abusive. He was emotionally abusive, but you never told anybody about it. So how is anybody supposed to know that he's not treating you well? But yet, that's what you said early on in the interrogation. I think that would be an interesting line of questioning to go and ask Wendi about. Did people know about it or not? So, yeah, but she did say that, well, maybe someone did this to help me. And then later, about literally a minute or two later, after she says that, well, people know that he didn't treat me well, maybe somebody did this because they think it was going to help me, he asked her straight out, well, do you think someone would do this for your benefit without you knowing? And she says no right away. She says no. Well, what happened? You just said that you just contradicted yourself again. So that was interesting. And then, of course, you have the part where she's going through the suspects and she says, well, Charlie used to make jokes about a TV being cheaper than a hitman. Now, why are you bringing that up? Well, we're asking you for serious suspects here. Here you have an investigator. He's really trying to get a list of real suspects. And then you say, well, I'll tell you who's not a suspect. Somebody who made a joke about a hitman, he is not a suspect. And neither is my family, by the way. I mean, what are you doing? I mean, that really reeks. That sounds like you're trying to really shield your family from this. It really didn't belong. And I think a lot of people made some points about this, but it really didn't belong. When you're listening to this, it really strikes you right away. She says, even my family who felt I was mistreated would never do anything like this. Okay, I guess, you can try to explain it away that, when someone's under stress like that, they may just blurt out anything. But I mean, she already gave a whole list of other types of people that may have done this, including Amy Adler's husband, which is also, I thought, a little interesting. Amy Adler was Dan's new girlfriend. And she was Wendi was complimentary of Amy Adler. She was. She said she's 50 years old, but she doesn't look 50. She's absolutely beautiful. So Wendi was being very complimentary of Amy Adler. And then she said, well, maybe Amy Adler's ex, she recently got divorced. Amy Adler also recently got divorced. So maybe her ex was the one, who did this. I thought that was interesting. I think that there's a little bit more there between Wendi and Amy, how Wendi really actually feels about Amy, and whether maybe there's a tinge of jealousy there. That's possible also. But I thought that was interesting that she wanted to point out that she thinks Amy Adler is beautiful. Okay. She also, throughout the interrogation, does, very, very kind of like on the side, disparages Dan by saying, he told the whole community that I was mentally ill. You know, I would never say anything. I never said anything about his emotional abuse, but he would go around and tell everybody that I'm mentally ill because obviously if I don't want to be with him, then I must be a crazy person. Now, what's also interesting is that if this was, you know, we know that a big reason, it seems, from that they got divorced was a religious reason. It was a religious reason. You know, he was getting so religious, and she really wasn't going along with it, and that seemed to be like a very big sticking point, which caused a lot of contention in their marriage. But then on the other hand, she says that during her interrogation, that a big reason for the divorce was because she was getting emotionally abused. She didn't want her boys growing up thinking that this is the way to treat a woman. Now let's think about that for a second. You understand. Now some people, by the way, and this is a very sensitive topic obviously, but some people are in an abusive marriage. And a lot of them don't realize that they're in an abusive marriage, which is part of the travesty, which is the tragedy. Someone's living through an abusive marriage and they don't think that they're in an abusive marriage. That's a tragedy in itself, and to get the person to actually realize that they're in an abusive marriage, and that's tough. And then when they do realize it, you know, what should they do with that information? Okay, that's a whole different discussion, really not beyond my expertise as a lawyer. But that's one thing. But then you have a person who understands, right? The next step is the person understands they're in an abusive marriage. Now, why do you leave that marriage? Now, Wendi was suggesting that the reason that she's leaving the marriage, now aside from the religious part, which seemed during the trial to be the big issue, but aside from aside from her getting emotionally abused, she feels that it's not good to stay in this marriage because then her kids are going to think that this is how you treat women. I have another suggestion. This is my suggestion. Maybe you shouldn't stay in a marriage because you shouldn't be being abused in a marriage. Isn't that a good enough reason to leave a marriage? Because you don't appreciate being emotionally abused? Why does it have to be, you know, you're above it all? I'm above it all. I can be emotionally abused. Use me as your rag. Use me as your dartboard. But it's going to affect the kids. So it's going to affect the kids. It's almost like, you know, like I'm just above it all, but my kids. I want to take care of my kids. Which, you know, it's just it's something doesn't sit right again with the whole story. So that was just another thing that stuck out to me during her interview. And then again, of course, you have one of the more famous questions that's probably also got spoken about already, was when the investigator asked her, you know, that you obviously want to catch this person, you're trying to be helpful. And he says, well, would your mind change if this person happened to have been someone who you know personally? And she actually says the truth. She says, well, yeah, if it would be my brother, it would be different, but I don't think my family would do anything like this anyway. So she kind of like blurts the quiet part out loud. Anyway, this was a fantastic. I mean, it was fantastic. It was very interesting interrogation. I sat through it all. Again, like my confession. This is the first time I'm sitting through it. I should have seen it earlier, and I'm sorry about that. I confess. I am still trying to juggle everything. You know, as I'm sure as we explode on this channel, then we'll be able to devote much more time to it. But in the meantime, I'm still trying to, you know, I still do have active clients, and I'm trying to keep everybody happy. So, but that is it for today. Please let me know. There's been a lot we covered. Please let me know in the comments what you feel about some of these observations and some of these suggestions. And if you haven't yet subscribed, like the video so we can continue bringing this analysis. All right. See you next time.